with India as a soft target. I mean, that's some view.
I think, Mark, there are a number of factors at work. First of all, of course, the United States effort to eliminate the Taliban, Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan has run into difficulties. General McChrystal has said that he needs far more troops.
Right.
And in fact, there is a review going on right now in the White House about what to do about this request for a massive increase in number of troops to deal with the situation. The blast which took place today, is very similar to what happened in July last year. And this time around, of course, the security measures were much better. Unfortunately, nobody was killed, although 3 of our guards were injured. And this is an attempt to really deter India from going ahead with activities in Afghanistan. Because, you have a terrorist blast, then you follow it up with a number of attacks on our people. And the net result of this is to try and force everybody into a siege mentality and not to go out and do your work among the people. And I think Foreign Secretary Rao's statement yesterday makes it very clear that India will not be deterred from carrying out its development and reconstruction work in Afghanistan.
Absolutely. In fact, what she did say was India has already made up its mind, invest and endure, because we believe in the cause of peace, democracy and development in Afghanistan. So India is definitely continuing with its investments, though she did mention $1.2 billion seems to be a small amount, but modest, but it's large from a...
No, it's large by Afghan standard. We are the 6th largest donor. We are way ahead of the Chinese in this particular case. And for a country like India, as a developing country, this is a huge sum of money. And Nirmala Rao did say that we are there to invest and endure and not to improve and exit, as some people said.
But so, talking about endurance, I mean, there have got to be a number of players who have to sit and endure this this particular phase in Afghanistan, because one seems to think, looking at it from the outside, that the government of the day is not strong enough to deal with these kind of anti-national forces.
Perhaps not, but if you look at the way things have developed, we've had the Afghan elections recently. Of course, there have been some problems with that, but this time the election was held by their own national election authorities for the first time. The Taliban, Al-Qaeda tried to disrupt the elections. People voted, even some people got their fingers chopped. So this is really a tribute to the Afghan people's desire to have a democratic process restored in their country. As far as the government is concerned, the Afghan National Army is being built up. It takes time. But eventually the long-term solution has to come by putting in further strengthening the Afghan National Army, because already there are signs of fatigue among the US and the NATO. They want to, public opinion in these countries is in favor of getting out their troops. And each casualty which they take, for example, the US recently lost about 8 soldiers. And every day there are bomb blasts. So each such incident actually increases the public demand to get out of there.
And you did mention a little earlier that the US is discussing this. In fact, the US President Obama was having a situation room meeting as of yesterday and today, perhaps. The fact is that what is the real, their focus is on that, the border with Pakistan and the huge Talibanization that's taking place there, the fact that the Pakistani troops have to be involved in this whole process. What kind of solutions do they have on the table?
I think the main problem there is that in the eastern and southern parts of Afghanistan, the real Pashtun areas, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda are still a formidable force. And of course on the border side, they have sanctuary to which they can go. And to handle this situation, they need to have, as General McChrystal said, a substantial increase in troop strength. Now this troop strength can either be from the American side, or it can be a combination of American and Afghan forces, which will take longer time. But in the long term, it's really the Afghan government which must build up its own troop strength to be able to maintain order and stability in their own country. And this should be really the long-term goal. In the interim period, yes, they do need external troop presence. And that
what is this interim period? How long do you think is the interim period?
Now this depends on how much money and effort goes into building up the Afghan army in terms of training the officer cadres, in terms of training the people, equipment. Unfortunately, this has been not been pursued with the vigor and determination it should have been from the beginning during the Bush administration. Now belatedly they have realized that this is an important part of the effort, along with the reconstruction.
How much is this has got to do with Pakistan's own development? I mean, the fact that the government over there as well is not very strong, and the U.S. is, it depends heavily on U.S. aid, and now U.S. aid, according to the scary Lugar bill, is dependent on a lot of factors. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's really the United States' plan.
Well, the United States is now in a position of having to depend a lot on Pakistan, especially for its logistics, supplying its troops. And that is a kind of tie from which they find it difficult to extricate themselves. So that limits the amount of pressure they can put on the Pakistan government. If they go too far, then they risk losing cooperation from Pakistan. So they have to play this game in a very careful way, put pressure but not enough to break the relationship.
Right.
And this bill in Congress for the first time is a serious effort to make sure that the aid to Pakistan is not diverted into channels which are aimed at India.
Right.
Or purposes which are aimed at India. I think we saw the case of the Harpoon missile, and every single arms transfer to Pakistan has always had an anti-Indian agenda behind in the minds of the Pakistanis. So this time, and the reaction from Pakistan clearly shows that they have realized this, recognized this also, and they want to be free from all such conditionalities. Now, this is something they have to resist.
So what do you think we need to do, since we are victims to that extent, but we heard what the Foreign Secretary said yesterday, effective pressure from the international community to be put on Pakistan. That's all that we are asking for right now. But and we are stopping our engagement with Pakistan. But do you think we should be considering engagement with Pakistan to try and deal with this in a more forceful manner, with this being the sole subject of discussion?
Well, engagement, so long as two countries have diplomatic relations, there will always be a certain level of engagement. The matter of how deep the engagement and what subjects is covered, that will fluctuate. And at the moment, we have, downgraded our engagement with Pakistan pending action against the Mumbai terrorist attack perpetrators. As far as putting pressure is concerned, we have to certainly do it. The recent bomb blast is another warning. There could be more bomb blasts. We have to sensitize the international community to this, that not only our embassies but others may also be targeted. We have to now look for a way by which we can get more directly involved in this, because it looks like the United States and NATO alone can't really, it's difficult to handle the situation. So the only alternative is a combination of the Afghan army and a more direct role for the UN in Afghanistan.
So we really need to get the United Nations to act, and then that doesn't look like a breach of sovereignty, because the arguments that people are putting forward within Pakistan, the military establishment, is that we are a sovereign nation. I mean, who the heck are these people trying to tell us what to do all the time? Yeah. That's the whole thing. That's
the danger of the, a unilateral intervention with the United States leading it, plus a few countries, plus NATO, is that it lacks a certain amount of legitimacy and credibility. Whereas if it's an operation under the UN, mandated by the UN and under control of the UN, then of course it has much wider international acceptance, and many other countries can participate, even to the extent of sending peacekeeping forces. India, for example, is sending peacekeeping forces to many UN missions. Our policy is that we will participate only in peacekeeping missions which are directly under the control of the UN and which have their mandate. So should that happen in Afghanistan, then of course not only India but many other countries could consider participating in peacekeeping. And that's, that would be the...
But do you think that that's a possibility in the future? Because the presence of the U.S. troops, it seems like it's really the U.S. that's leading this entire mission.
Well, Afghanistan, the British went with an army. They came out with one man. They had 2 or 3 Afghan wars. Each time they couldn't achieve their objectives. The Soviets also were faced with a defeat, and now the U.S., they are at a critical stage. They are facing a very serious problem, and I think...
But if I have to ask a pointed question, the finger of suspicion, I mean, where do you think it's pointed at? Because the last time it was with Pakistan, the last blast, there was evidence that was produced in front of them as well, which was forcing them to act. But in this case, you think that's the same? Because the Foreign Secretary said it's a very similar kind of blast.
Yeah, it's definitely a similar kind of blast, and I'm sure that the same people who were behind that blast in last year would probably be doing, because the modus operandi is exactly the same. And the intentions of the people who carried out the blast in July are still valid, if not more amplified this time.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan. Thank you for joining us on Data Edition. We're taking a quick break, and when we come